Hi everyone! For today we are going to start a project called the Do Nothing Machine, where we have an assembly, which will actually be our first assembly in Fusion 360. As you can see, there are multiple parts and we have relationships between those parts to create certain types of motion. So we're going to wind up starting by creating all the shapes, then putting it all together, and then making sure we can constrain it or use joints in specific ways to make sure we get our motion. All right, so let's get started. I've got a new file open right here. We're making sure we're in our design workspace, and we're going to start by creating our base. So I'm going to create a component. Our components are going to be very important for this activity. We want to make sure that our components are labeled and that our parent is always the entire document. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to activate our new component, our base. I'm going to create a sketch. For this sketch, we want our sketch to be on the XY plane, or the top, which is this one down here. If we choose it, we're going to create our base shape, which is basically a square. We can use a new kind of rectangle that we haven't used yet, the center rectangle. If we use the center rectangle, it's kind of like the circle tool, where it'll let you place the center and then measure both sides. So both sides need to be 150. So I'm going to hit 150, tab 150, and hit enter, and zoom out a little bit. And I'm actually going to finish the sketch. So I'm going to move to home view again. We're going to extrude this to 35 millimeters. So we have this nice block. We want to cut some grooves out of it. So I'm going to start a sketch, and I'm going to choose one of the sides of our box. Either way works, because we're going to need to do both. All right, there's a few different ways to make the groove that we need to take out of this. I'm going to make mine separate and then move it to where it needs to go, just so you can see it a little easier. So I'm going to choose my line tool, and I'm just going to make the general shape that we need. All right, so what I've done is I've taken the line tool, and I just used that line tool to make two horizontal lines, the top and the bottom, and two diagonal lines in between. All right, we need to use some constraints to make sure this is modeled correctly. So I'm going to use the equals constraint to put equals on both of these sides. All right, and then we're going to need to use some dimensional constraints to create the sizes. So this bottom line here is going to be 25 millimeters, right? From top to bottom is going to be 17.5. All right, and then the angle between the bottom and a side, either one, is going to be 76 degrees. All right, at this point we have our shape. We need to put this in the center, all right, of this line. So what we can use is the midpoint constraint up here. If you choose midpoint, we're going to choose the top line of our box and the top line of our trapezoid. This snaps the centers together, and we can finish our sketch. I'm going to choose our home view again so we can see it a little clearer. We're going to extrude this throughout the entire shape. You can click and drag. You could click and change it to cut and change the distance to all. Either way works for this point. But best practice would be for all. So that way, just in case we change the sizes, that it would still change to the intent, the design intent that we had. All right, we're going to hit OK. Now we need to do the same thing on this side here. So I'm going to start a sketch, start it on that side. We're going to use our line tool, make our little trapezoid-ish shape. If you see, this time I didn't make the top and the bottom parallel to each other, so I'm going to add a parallel constraint between these two. I'm going to add my equals constraint between the two diagonal sides. Then I'm going to add my dimensions. So the bottom one was 25 millimeters. Yes, 25 millimeters. Uh-oh. Our top to our bottom was 17.5. Somehow we have a lot of extra numbers here. 17.5. There we go. All right, and if you've noticed, we have a little bit of an issue. If you notice, these started to change angles before we add the other dimension. I'm going to drag this a little bit so that when I add my angular dimension, it doesn't accidentally snap to the opposite side. So now I'm going to add in a dimension between our bottom and our edge. That was 76 degrees. Okay, now we're going to again do the midpoint constraint, click on our top, and finish. All right, we can extrude, choose our area or our profile. We're going to change it from distance to all. We're going to say we're going to cut, and we're going to change our direction by this little flip button, and that's a little more accurate for what we want to do. So we're going to hit OK. Now if you remember from the original one I showed you all, there is a fillet, like a curve, on many of these outer corners. So we're going to choose in our modify panel the fillet tool. We're going to choose each of these little edges all the way around your shape. Okay, and then we're also going to choose the vertical corners as well. And this is going to be a 5mm radius fillet. All right, here's our base. Now what we're going to need to do is we need to create a new component and start our next shape. So to do so, we're going to create our new component, but if you notice, it's trying to add our base as the parent, and we don't want that. So we have two ways we could do this. Before we clicked on new component, we could have clicked on the top level in our browser, or we can click the little X that was over here by the parent and choose it now, and now hit OK. If you didn't name it, like I just forgot to, we're going to go to our properties for our component, and we're going to rename this. This one's going to be the slider. All right, I'm going to change it on both. And close. All right. There's a few ways we can do this. For this one, I'm going to show you how to make them separated in the same document, and then we'll put them together. For future shapes that we can make it directly attached to our object as well. Actually, before we do that, I want to do one more thing. So, oh, no, okay. I'm actually going to right click on base here and ground it right now. Grounding will come in really handy a little later. I'll show you why, but for now, we're just going to right click in there, ground it. Okay, I'm going to create a sketch. This sketch I'm going to create on our front plane, the XZ plane. Like I said before, we could move it, we could create a shape out here. We could technically use the lines we already have as well. So I'm going to show you the actual projection version of this right now. I'm going to hit create, and I'm going to project and include. And I want to choose the project option, and I'm just going to project the kind of trapezoidal shape that we had from before, at least part of it. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. So the shape that we're going to make is a taller trapezoid. So now we can kind of grab our line tool. I'm just going to make this a little longer, come across, and come down across the side. If you notice, this one on the edge here is not quite right. Okay, we're not quite at the right angle, but we can, we can make these equal to each other, and that will snap. Right, we want our sketch dimension, we want our top to our bottom to be 25, and that's our sketch. We could have created our trapezoid over on the side like we did before, but again, there are a couple different ways to do lots of things. So right now, we are going to extrude this to 50 millimeters. So we have this little wedge, and we want to make a sketch on the top, and we're going to make a circle directly in the middle. So if we put our cursor towards the end, we can see, oops, I clicked a little early. We can see that it brings these dotted lines. If we do the same thing on the side here, it'll bring a dotted line across. Okay, so we need to do it in both directions so that it's directly in the middle. And this is an 8mm circle. And we're going to extrude it down. We're going to cut. And this is going to be 20mm. And if it's not doing in the right direction, we can switch. Oops, it's not giving me my flip direction. Well, then we're gonna, oops, go -180. If I could type. Oh, not taper angle. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing. We're gonna cancel that. That's on me. It did not go nearly as well as I'd hoped. All right, -20 will work. We could have also used the hole tool and just done a simple hole on the top there. There are multiple ways to do a lot of the things that we're doing. All right. All right, and for here, we're actually going to pause at this point, and we will create the other shapes in a separate video.